feet on the floor.
We're live.
Okay, hi. I'm Capi from Always in Stitches in Noblesville, Indiana. And I've been working on a quilt, and I wanted to kind of share with you one of the tools that makes it super, super easy for me to cut half square triangles and squares and just anything I want to cut that makes it an easier process. It's a Martelli mat that rotates and spins, so it's very, very cool. The project I'm working on is Let's Flamingle quilt. This is by Blank Quilting, and I'm in the process of making our shop sample, and we actually have this available for you in a kit form. So if you see this, think, gosh, I've got to make that quilt. It's stinking cute. It's not really an advanced, I would call it ambitious beginner to a moderate person as far as your skill level. This one may look a little scary, but it's not bad. They're just half square triangles and squares. So half square triangles are kind of the foundation piece for every quilt you make if you do much piecing. But the fabric's what makes it fun, because when you look at the quilt squares, the fussy cutting of the flamingos really brings out the unique part of this quilt. So there's some flip-flops. And then this piece is my favorite. Look at these flamingos with the margarita glasses. I'm going to say they're margaritas. I don't know, you call it whatever you want. But in my world, that's a margarita. So you see, this is just a big block with little pieces around it. So the busyness of this block makes it look like you've done a lot more work than you really have, which I always like, because as much as this block is beautiful, I like making lots of these because they're easier to make. So this has got a lot of fussiness to it, but that's doable. One of the things that's really important when making blocks like these that have lots of fussiness to them is accurate cutting. So that's probably the one thing that I didn't realize as a beginning quilter, how important it was to have my pieces be the size they're supposed to be when I sew them into the block. And this tool helps that happen. So what this is, it's called a Martelli Mat, and it spins. So remember the Lazy Susan used to sit in the middle of Grandma's table? This mat's on a Lazy Susan, and it has three parts. You have the mat, so this is the mat, and I actually can like take the mat off and take it over to my cutting table if I want to cut on my cutting table. It doesn't have to stay on this. That's one of the things I like about it, is it's you can take it apart however you want to use it. So I have my mat, so if I cut and carry that to my sewing machine, I can do that. You have this piece that's a pressing mat. So if I wanted to put my pieces on here and iron them, I can do that. Or oftentimes what I find I'm doing is I'm laying out my pieces on here and then taking that to my sewing area so that I'm ready to sew my blocks together in one piece, and I can see how I'm laying it out. So this is a fun piece. And then this is the spinny part. So it comes all three pieces, and the other part that's really cool is, like, if you're cutting mat, if you really use it a lot and you wear it down, or say you accidentally forget and put it in your car and it melts, ask me how I know, then you can replace just this part, or you can replace just this part. So it's kind of nice, because even if you do something to the pieces, you're going to still have them. But these are very durable. I've had mine a long time, and it just keeps up beating and keeps on going. So why would you care if your mat spins? I mean, that's, at the end of the day, it's a question. I've got this mat, which is fine, but why do I also need a mat that I can, put my salt and pepper on and spin it around the table, so to speak? There's a lot of reasons. The main thing I like is, once I cut all my strips, if I'm going to do 2-inch squares, and for instance, in this flamingo pattern, it calls for a 2 7/8 inch strip that you're supposed to cut into 2 7/8 inch squares. So I know there's 2 7/8 inch on my ruler, because I took math and I know how that works, but I'm not going to cut a 2 7/8 inch square that I'm going to have to sew together to make another half square triangle. If it's 2 7/8, I'm going to cut it 3-inch. And if I want to cut a bunch of 3-inch pieces, and this one's actually 2.5, so I'm going to cut these 2.5-inch pieces for squares, I can just put this on my mat, and I've put together the two pieces that are going to become my half square triangle. So I have my white and my not pumpkin. What is that? Pineapple. Oh my gosh, I'm losing my mind. Pineapple piece together. So when I have to cut that in to square it off, now if I was like on my regular cutting table, I would have to turn that around. But because I'm on my Martelli, I just spin it, and now I find my 2.5 mark, and I cut again. Now I'm going to continue to cut my 2.5 inch pieces, but I didn't have to turn my hand wonky to go cut that piece. The other reason I like it is if I'm cutting a series of half square triangles, because I like to make my half square triangles this way, where you just sew down the middle and cut them in half. But there are sometimes angles or pieces that you need to be able to cut against the piece of fabric like this. You've got some templates that'll make you do like this. So when I'm cutting those kind of angles like that, and I'm going to make this as right as I can. And let's see, we'll make it there. There we go. Okay. So if I'm going to cut this piece, I cut like this. And if I wasn't on a rotating mat, I would go backwards. Well, you know what that makes the potential for? These fingers to become a little shorter. The goal is to finish the project with 10 fingers intact. You never want to finish a project with a few less fingers. It's not pretty. So I've cut my piece this way. Now when I need to cut back that way, I just turn my mat, and now I'm back cutting square with the whirl. So I'm not making cuts that potentially give me an opportunity to cut a finger off. And now I've got my half piece that I can sew here, and I've got what I need to do the next piece. Okay, so that's one reason I like the mat. The other thing is, I said I always cut my pieces a little bigger. Some people are so good at sewing their pieces and they come out just perfect that they don't have to trim them to the size they want them to be. Well, like I said, I always cut my pieces, like if it says 2 7/8, I'm going to cut 3 inch. If it says 2.5, I'm probably going to cut 2 3/4, again, because I can find 3/4. I can't find 7/8, but I can find 3/4 on the ruler, and then I'm going to trim them down. So these pieces have been cut, and I think they need to be 2.5 inch squares. Let me see. Yeah. So I'm going to trim these. Now, just take a peek over here, Peter, at how many of these I've got to trim up. So I have all of these that I have to trim to 2.5 inch squares. And I know, and these I've trimmed, so there's a lot of these half square triangles in this quilt. And I like to take my piece that's been cut at 3 inches and trim it to 2.5 and have it very, very, very accurate. That's just the way I like to do it. So I'm going to press all these open, which is what I've done with this one. See, he's pressed open. And I'm going to lay him over here in Martelli, and I'm going to cut and square him up. So, and I know Dawn does it a different way. Everybody does it a different way. But this is what I'm going to do. So here's my 2.5 inch line. And I'm going to put this diagonal that runs on my sewing line. And see, I've got extra all the way around. And I'm making now my exactly perfect 2.5 inch square. So I can cut there, look, I can turn, and I can cut here. Now, the thing that I would do if I was on my flat mat is then I would pick up my fabric, I would pick up my ruler, and I would turn them around again. But I don't have to with my Martelli. I can just put this back in place. And again, I'm putting my 2.5 inch here, my 2.5 inch here. I'm lining that right up on that dot right there. And now I have exactly my 2.5 inch square. I cut, I turn. See, I'm not flipping my hand around. And I cut again. So I do a lot of half square triangles, and this is the way I make them. So that when I sew together this piece that has a bazillion little points that have to match, I now have a 2.5 inch square that's going to match this 2.5 inch square, that's going to match the 2.5 inch square that's not a piece. They're all going to be exactly the same size. So that's why I oversize my triangles. Now, I know some people cut them exactly, sew them, and just trust that they're the right size. But I like to pre-cut these and then sew them together like this, and then I square up this block again. And again, when I'm squaring up a block, if I want this block to be, let's see how big this block is supposed to be, evidently 10.5. So let's say it wasn't square, I put it on my Martelli. Same thing, I'm going to square this block up. I'm going to run my diagonal where it needs to be. I'm going to put everything in the right place. And if it's hanging over a little bit there, like let's say this was wrong, I'm not going to cut this because I've already squared this block and I'm not going to screw it up. But I would cut this side, then I would turn and I would cut this side. And then when I'm ready, I can just turn my thing and I can do the same thing. I can cut this side and I can cut this side. So what I'm not doing is moving my fabric around and distorting it. I'm keeping my fabric nice and flat and just putting my ruler on it so that it stays flat and I'm not distorting it when I move the fabric. So That's why I like my Martelli mat. It is the best for getting nice, perfectly square every time. And I'm not twisting my hand in weird ways and taking the potential to come out of sewing, you know, like this. with not enough fingers, you know.
To grip your martini.
To grip my martini. That's right. Or my margarita, because, you know, I want it to be right.
I meant margarita. I did mean
You did
margarita.
margarita. You know better. I'm not the martini girl.
Nope.
I'm not the martini girl. So that's
I guess your quilting is so fancy. That's where the martini
comes in, yeah. No, I'm a little more down home than that. The margarita. So this is why I love my Martelli mat. I've had mine for several years, like I said. I had, actually the owner of our shop, she and I were on a retreat, and that's the other reason. You can take this if you're at a retreat weekend and it sits right by your sewing machine. It's usually not too big to, you know, if you go to those retreats, there's like mats everywhere and you can never get to one to cut. This is nice and close. I can use it. I can take what I cut to an ironing space and iron and bring it back. And so I like it for retreats too. When I travel, it goes on retreats. And the cool thing is this fits in the bottom of my suitcase. So if you fly someplace, this will fit in a 21-inch carry-on bag, which is awesome. So it will fit in a bag. And that's when I take mine, is to use it for that. Because it's really nice to sit next to your sewing machine and just cut, cut, cut. Oh, wait, I need to turn it this way. Cut, cut, cut. Turn it this way. Cut, cut, cut. So that's about the sum of the whole thing. So if you want one during May of 2021, because this will go on a video that could be on eternity, in May of 2021, we're running a special on these mats. If you want to find out about that, you can call 317-776-4227. Ask for Jennifer. She can give you the deal that we've got going on just during the month of May. And it's a really good deal, by the way. If I was going to buy one, this is the time to do it. And get your very own version of this. We can ship them anywhere you want. You can also go to our website, www.alwaysinstitches1. It's the number. It's not spelled out, just alwaysinstitches1, because we are your #1 shop, 1.com. So thanks for watching. We look forward to seeing you in the shop soon. Happy stitching.